Hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Shireen Jijiboy, and I am the president of the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to yet another IUSSP webinar, and I'm delighted that so many have joined us today. I know we're all looking forward to this debate in a gender equitable world with equity and sexual and reproductive rights for men and women. We would expect that there would be about the same number or more vasectomies as tubal sterilizations among couples wanting to stop childbearing. Yes or no? This webinar has been organized by the IUSSP Scientific Panel on Couples, Reproductive Health and Fertility, which is led by Stan Becker, who will speak next. Just a word on the debates. IUSSP has long used debates to bring out opposing views on critical topics at our international population conferences. And we have adapted these to the webinar format in recent times, thanks in large part to Stan and the work of this scientific panel. Over the last year or so, this panel has organized a number of stimulating debates on a range of topics. I believe all of these debates can be accessed through our website. This is the first in 2022 of many, I hope. We're most grateful to Stan and the members of the panel for organizing it. Thank you, and over to you, Stan.
Good morning. My name is Stan Becker. It's my pleasure to be chair of the IUSSP panel on couples and reproductive health and fertility, to introduce this debate and the debaters and other contributors. We've had two previous debates, as Shireen mentioned, that are available on our website. Today we have 3 debaters on each team, and we'll alternate between teams. The team winning the coin flip will decide which team goes first. You have voted already on the debate, and we'll have another vote afterwards to see if one team has been more convincing. On the yes team, we have Deborah Bateson of the Family Planning Organization of New South Wales, Priya Nanda of Gates Foundation India, and Logan Nichols of the Male Contraceptive Initiative in the USA. On the no team, we have Raquel Zanatta of the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil, Joe Strong of the London School of Economics and Political Science, UK, and Akanni Akinyemi of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ife, Nigeria. Suzana Cavenaghi of our panel and recently retired from the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics will facilitate. Angela Akol of IPAS Nairobi, Kenya, has prepared some tough questions for each team to start the Q&A. Neetu John of Columbia University, USA, and of our panel will help Suzana with questions that you pose in the question and answer section. Then Ambrose Akinlo of our panel and currently visiting researcher at the University of Texas, USA, will give a summary and maybe reconciliation. We expect the whole debate will take about 90 minutes. Before I turn things over to Suzana, I would like to tell a brief story of relevance. I've worked in the population field for over 40 years. Many people in my congregation know this about me. One Sunday, about 25 years ago, a friend came up to me after worship and whispered in my ear, "Stan, I did my part for population this week. I got a vasectomy." A couple of years later, the same thing happened with another man from the congregation. The question I posed to think about is this: why were they whispering? It seems vasectomy has an image problem in the USA and many countries. With that, over to Suzana. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this very nice debate. And I would like, first of all, to thank Stan for the impressive coordination of this debate. So, to start and to be very fair, we are going to ask the teams to turn on their cameras, not the mics, so you can now know these debaters, the teams, and I'll have to flip the coin here. So I'll share the screen with a flip coin, And I'll ask the yes team, the Deborah, for being the woman there, to select, to call for heads or tails, and then the winner selects who goes first.
Okay, we'll go for heads. Thank you.
Heads, okay.
Yes.
So let's go. Heads.
Oh.
Heads it is. So you select who goes first, yes team or no team, and then we'll intercalate between the debaters, yes and no.
Okay, so I think we'll go first.
Okay. So Deborah, please, you have 5 minutes for defending the yes position for this debate.
Great. I'm just going to share my screen, so I'll just bring this up.
And I'll stop sharing mine. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And I just have to find this. Okay. So this is the question that we're asking. In a world with equity of sexual and reproductive rights for men and women, there will be the same number or more vasectomies as tubal ligations, yes or no? And I know that you are all already very convinced that the answer to this is, of course, yes. Because, well, in fact, if you're not, I know our team, Logan, Priya, and myself, are going to persuade you otherwise, because our team stands for reproductive justice for all, and really no one can deny that. But we're going to start with some basic facts, because I am, after all, a family planning doctor. And just to state, you know, vasectomy is easy with a little bit of local anesthetic and a gentle no scalpel technique. It's safe, it's cheap, it's a bit easier to reverse if needed. And, you know, as a backup, sperm freezing is much easier than egg freezing. Unlike tubal ligation, it doesn't need fancy operating theatres and expensive anaesthetists and gynecologists. It doesn't go anywhere near the peritoneal cavity. It can easily be taught to low and mid-level providers and reach men in rural and very remote areas across the globe. It's a bit of a no-brainer. But it's more complex than that. In a gender equitable world, reproductive responsibilities are shared amongst men and women. And men, I know from my research, want to share contraceptive responsibilities, and women want men to share these responsibilities. Yet there are a few options available for men. Vasectomy, we're talking about, condoms, withdrawal, we wouldn't recommend it. We have to acknowledge it, and traditional fertility awareness methods, which even when they're delivered by fancy technology, like this sexy looking, you know, Natural Cycles phone app developed by this very attractive Swedish couple, it still has, you know, very unsexy limitations, including long periods of abstinence. We need more options, and as Logan's going to be compellingly showing us, this will increase uptake of all methods. These are methods that men want to use. But I want to just be upfront here, because, you know, our team, we're very clear, in a gender equitable world, there is no forced sterilisation. It's important to stress that our argument has nothing to do with coercion, but instead a gender equitable framework where men and women are free to make their own informed choice about what method of contraception to use, including permanent methods. I'm also sure that we're all familiar with these shocking injustices when it comes to forced sterilizations across all of our countries, especially for marginalized women and vulnerable women, but also for men. In fact, that young woman on the right there, Chanel McKenna, was born with cerebral palsy in Australia and was sterilised at the age of 11. So shocking atrocities. But I want to now have a bit of a case study about Australia, because you may or may not know that, in fact, we have higher rates of vasectomy than tubal ligation for the past decades, with vasectomy currently being the third most prevalent method used in Australia. And around 1 in 4 men over the age of 40 have had a vasectomy. And a study I did, actually, of men using internet dating, about 55% have either had or would consider having a vasectomy. You can just look at those those are Medicare claims, tubal ligations. You can see, you know, shooting down on the right. And then you can see with the vasectomies, this is across different states and territories, 2005 to 2018. Bit of a dip, but rising up again. And our latest national data shows around 7.5% of women rely on partner vasectomy and 3.5% have tubal ligations. So what are the lessons we can learn from Australia? It certainly relates to gender equity. It's not straightforward, but in 2006, peak vasectomy time in Australia, we ranked 15th on the Global Gender Gap Index, only falling behind those out there, Nordic countries. But we also need to look at men's role in Australian society, which has been described as paradoxical, at once embracing a shift to the positive, inclusive, caring and involved masculinity, where being a real man does not mean dominance and distance from the domestic sphere, but at the same time, this stepping up amongst men can take on something of a heroic role and, to look a bit good and brag a bit in front of your mates around the barbecue. And indeed, the role of local heroic champions. This is a violin teacher, Paul Redfern. These have been pivotal in Australia. So Paul proudly told our state news channel, with good reason, a vasectomy felt easier than either of us being on birth control or my wife getting her tubes tied. And he also added, for everyone to know, perhaps his friends as well, vasectomies equal sexy time without a care in the world. And certainly, no problems for him, but reassuring for other men in terms of libido and erectile functions, not a worry or no worries, as we say. And programmatically, while in the 1970s here, men needed permission from their wife to have a vasectomy, things changed in the late 80s and 90s with freestanding walk-in clinics with subsidized vasectomies popping up where absolutely no questions were asked. Unlike in France, for instance, where vasectomies were illegal until 2001, or other countries with mandatory cooling off periods or strict lower age limits. So in a gender equitable world, equity is possible for men and women without incurring losses for women. Within a reproductive justice framework, they can be the same number. This is powerless in Papua New Guinea, a country with very high rates of domestic violence. He's doing his bit, he's making local change happening. So we need to remove barriers to men's contraceptive involvement and increase men's option, because this is going to increase global uptake of all male methods, including vasectomy, because it is, after all, just a little snip. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I will turn to Raquel Zanatta for the noting more tubal ligations in the world. The word is not Australia.
Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me just set my alarm. Okay, thank you, Suzana. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is a very complex subject, and I only have 5 minutes. In a gender equitable world with equity of sexual and reproductive rights for men and women, wait, what? Gender equitable world? 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals tackle precisely the issue of gender equity and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Vasectomies would increase the sharing of responsibilities regarding pregnancy prevention. However, gender norms, stereotypes, and gender inequalities affect access to and use of health resources. Can we even picture what true equity looks like? Let's borrow the Global Gender Gap Index Deborah just mentioned, made by the World Economic Forum, to check the kind of gender equitable world we have. This index tracks progress towards equality by analyzing the evolution of gender-based gaps in economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. The darker the country on the map, the more equal the statuses of women and men are. Throughout my presentation, I will use some statistics from these countries as examples. To the right, I brought the first 10 countries that appear in the rank. Let's take a look at 2 of them as examples of what a country with equality looks like. Namibia is ranked high, suggesting that equality does not necessarily mean women's lives are improved. They are just more similar to men's. In Namibia, maternal mortality is 195 per 100,000 live births, and the unmet need for contraception reaches almost 18% of women of reproductive age. In Iceland, 22% of women experience gender violence in their lifetime, a number that is close to Namibia. As equality does not really mean equity, we would need to provide women with extra resources to meet their goals. Women need more than basic. My colleague Joe will expand on this factor in his talk, so let me use my minutes to pose a few questions. Does equity guarantee that women will have a variety of methods to choose from? When we look at the various regions of the world, we do see that vasectomy is more prevalent than sterilization in Oceania, a continent that ranks high in gender equity, as we just saw. However, It also has a lower general prevalence of women using any method when compared to Europe. In the latter, the weight of vasectomies and tubal sterilizations on the contraceptive mix is much smaller than that of other methods. Does equity guarantee that the logic behind the care for dependents and domestic work will change? This graph shows the proportion of time spent on unpaid care work in European countries. Women are the orange dots. Without exception, women spend more time on these tasks. In this next graph, we can see what happens to men's and women's earnings once the first child is born. The female is the darker line, the one with the major declines. So does equity guarantee that the labor laws will eliminate the motherhood penalty? It does not. A word with equity is utopic. Women need autonomy and power. Now let's face the second half. Why would we expect there would be about the same number of or more vasectomies as tubal sterilizations among couples waiting to stop childbearing? We wouldn't. Long-term trends in contraceptive prevalence around the world show an increase in condom use for all regions and a decline in male vasectomies in Europe and North America. So in a gender equitable world, condoms should be the most prevalent, and that's what we should be concerned about. Trends for the developed world, with a few exceptions, also show how male and female sterilizations have a much lower prevalence than IUDs and male condoms in those countries with more equality. In fact, countries showing a high proportion of tubal sterilization are located in Central and South America, where cultural and structural barriers led women to historically have problems accessing a variety of contraceptives. The truth is, in a gender equitable world, women and men would not need to rely on invasive procedures. And speaking of having a choice, we have observed growing proportions of women who want to remain childless, some of them by choice. This is the case for 1 in every 5 women in Switzerland and Germany. For these women, and also for those who will eventually get divorced after having children, a permanent method is necessary, as they might change sexual partners and cannot rely on vasectomies. So tubal sterilizations empowers women who want to stop childbearing regardless of their union status. As a matter of fact, we know too little about couples. What are couples nowadays? How do we measure their pregnancy intention? My colleague Akanni will expand on this subject in a few minutes. Although improving the contraceptive method mix is a goal of reproductive justice, only tubal sterilization really empowers women who want to be sure not to get pregnant. So for all those reasons I mentioned today, I believe we do not need to expect the same number of vasectomies or tubal ligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Now we'll turn to Logan for the yes side.
Thank you. So instead of sharing slides, I think I'm just going to talk through my argument, which is using the United States as a central lens. And I'll also be thinking about what true equity really means in our question of, in a world with true equity, we would see the same or more number of vasectomies. And I think that true equity would really provide equal opportunity for reproductive autonomy for both men and women. But true equity relies on a number of things. You know, we've talked about the measures by which we can quantify equity. But I think that equity also relies on a number of more difficult things to measure. And moreover, it is a comprehensive measurement that requires access, affordability, education, and a number of different, and accepting cultural environment as well towards contraception. And the United States is a place where we've achieved many significant advances in equity, but have yet to actually achieve true equity in a number of ways. Specifically, the ways that we have achieved equity. I've mentioned education, work, the pay gap, those are all very important, but dissimilarities exist in the reproductive realm. We can, of course, think about unpaid work, which is mentioned. We can think about child care and child rearing. We can also think about, in the United States, the incoming decision on Roe v. Wade and how that introduces inequities and, of course, the removal of reproductive rights. And it's very important for us to keep the reproductive rights of women front and center. But at the same time, we have to consider the reproductive rights of men. And when we consider couples, we have to consider couples as either a dyadic unit, or we have to consider men and women individually as requiring reproductive autonomy. Among married couples in the United States, it's only about 17% that rely on vasectomy as compared to 31% that rely on tubal ligation. And this is for a number of reasons. One, these couples are seeking permanent sterilization. The US healthcare system is not built to cater to men. Family planning services, particularly in the public sector, are marketed and provided primarily to women. Men don't see a reproductive healthcare provider until much later in life, as compared to women who see a reproductive healthcare provider early. And so men are not well-versed in contraception. They don't engage with anyone in their reproductive journeys until they are nearly family complete. And this is in spite of the fact that men have a positive response to family planning programs and have a desire for the information and services that come out of them. In fact, men have a desire to participate in contraception. Work that my organization has done has illustrated that a significant percentage of men feel wholly or significantly responsible for family planning in their family, but find that they lack the options to participate equally. I think the cultural environment also plays a big deal into why we see this disparity in vasectomy and tubal ligations in the United States. Men aren't seen as reproductive beings from the outside. This, of course, is partly due to the way that reproductive healthcare services are marketed and provided, but it's also the fact that men are generally just not seen as reproductive beings. There's an excellent book called Gynecology, G-U-Y, Gynecology, that illustrates how men have not been well studied when it comes to reproductive health, how men are the standard body in every flavor of medicine, except for reproductive medicine. We're only learning recently how men play into prenatal health, how men, preconception health, how men's health can play a role downstream. And men and such have kind of stayed out of contraception. They have taken a back seat, some of them very happily, but it relieves them of the burden, even though that parity has a downside, right? We have given autonomy to women because they, of course, have the burden of pregnancy, but as such, we have left men behind and not allowed them to participate equally in a productive conversation. Men also aren't well educated in sex education or in contraception in general. There's some embarrassing statistic that 30 or 40% of men can tell you what IUD stands for. Moreover, when it comes to vasectomy, they have concerns about sterility. They have concerns about erections. They have many concerns about what their sexual performance would be because they don't know the actual procedure or how it takes place or what its impact may be. They don't know its safety, its ease of reliability, its efficacy. This is all magnified by the fact that men don't have a wide range of contraceptive choices. My organization, Male Contraceptive Initiative, is of course trying to put out more contraceptive options into the market and get men participating more in contraception. And that's because currently, with only condoms and vasectomy, men don't have reason to get into the game, except in the case of self-interest or benevolence. Right? Many men get a vasectomy in order to benefit their partner. This is really due to the fact that this does a disservice to men and women alike, as the tools to grant this reproductive autonomy are now under the pressure and the burden for women to bear. So to achieve true equity, we would need comprehensive sex education, a slate of contraception options besides sterilization for men, and a healthcare system that prioritizes men as reproductive beings. At that point, we'll actually be able to realize the safe, easy choice of vasectomy as a priority and as a option above and beyond tubal ligation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Logan. I think the team yes, no so far is better with the timing. So I'll ask now Joe Strong to go for the no side, and thank you, Logan, for your presentation.
Hi, Suzana. Actually, I think when I gave the list, it's Akanni who's next.
Oh, Akanni is next. Oh, sorry. So Akanni, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
You're mute.
Akanni, can you turn on your mic? We cannot hear you yet.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, now it's fine. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah. So I say thank you, and for those who have voted no already, and those also who are considering no. And again, to thank the previous speakers, particularly Deborah and Logan, for arguing our case. They've made good points that we're also focusing on. First is about the issue about gender equity. That's not a straightforward concept. And also that when you talk about gender equity, therefore, there are points about equal opportunities and also about reproductive autonomy. So it's on that premise first that we need to think about those of us in social sciences or in population science. So how do we measure about couples' fertility decisions? This is a very good model, for instance, to show that when you start to talk about couples' fertility decisions, you are thinking about what the male partner is thinking, what the female partner also is thinking, and how do they also agree about decisions on fertility issues. Okay, so why therefore do we need to say then that men should go for permanent solution, whereas there are other solutions, as we alluded to, that can give you additional value beyond just fertility regulation. That also brings into issue about protection of sexually transmitted infections. So one of those major issues that we also have when we talk about gender equity is about therefore how do we measure, methodological issues. First is to say that when you ask women, for instance, about their preference, fertility preference, what do they say? When you ask men, and also when you make it like a couple-centered focus. So then therefore the issue about agreeing, when you think about this gender equity, therefore, on when to take a permanent decision on to say we don't need another child, then becomes a big issue. What studies have shown across is to say that decisions about taking a permanent solution is born out of a lot of issues, either through compromise, and also that people work towards this, shifting grants. So there are key rules that have been well articulated in literature. First is about to say that the influence that lead people or couples to say, well, I want to take the decisions, and in three rules. First, about when you think about the egalitarian rules, which is to buttress this gender equity, or you think about the power rule when you think about the patriarchal society, where what you have in many of these sub-Saharan African countries, or when you think about the sphere of interest, where women therefore take leadership or they take control, what we call the veto rule in what affect them. So in issue about fertility decision, particularly taking the permanent solution to fertility issue, studies have shown that it's majorly from women's angle. So then the next question we ask about methodological issues, then whose fertility when you say couples? Whose fertility is it? Then we need to take cognizance of then what happens within this couple and the dynamics. And why should we expect therefore to say that the number of male who take vasectomy must be the number of women also who took a permanent solution? So one of those things we think about is the complexity within marriage. One of those things about divorce, which we see across, in US, for instance, the number is growing, and also across all the world. So when you take divorce, for instance, there are several scenarios you think about it. People who remarry after divorce, and you have fertility before then. So how do we expect, therefore, to say that for couples, therefore, in divorce situation, when maybe the woman has already like 2 children coming to the marriage, and you have none. So how do we therefore settle to say then they should go for the same type of solution? Another issue is about polygamous, which we have in many sub-Saharan African countries, okay? Which therefore the decision you want to take is not just centered about this just one woman. You have to take the decision, taking cognizance of all those other scenarios around you. And the last point about also this marital complexity is about partners who just cohabit. Okay, because what studies also showed is to say that for cohabiting partners, unwanted pregnancy at times stabilizes, that's cohabiting choice. So we think therefore that rather for men to start thinking about going for a permanent solution, there are other alternative approaches. I mean, condom, for instance, will not just help you in limiting the number of children you have, it also protects you from other diseases. So my position again, and our position is to say that our answer is no. So we again want to thank those who have voted for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Akanni. Thank you very much. You had enough time, so Joe can have like 30 seconds more later. Now we are going to turn to Priya and Nanda for the yes side, the last from the team yes. Thank you.
Thank you
you so much. I'd like to start with the fact that we are rejoicing the potential association between different parameters and indicators of gender equality and parity in male and female sterilization. We are not in this debate comparing condoms versus vasectomy, but the potential for men and women to take equal responsibility in decisions around completing fertility, their desired fertility, and being responsible in sharing the burden of the decisions around sterilization, which can happen within couples or outside of couples. Now, in reality, the conditions that enable reproductive autonomy of this nature and the equal responsibility and burden of side effect management are not equal between men and women, especially in the context of fertility management. And this is what we have emphasized in our side of the debate. The burden of preventing unintended pregnancies in equitable method choice is skewed with female use methods, more female use methods where side effects are more difficult for women to manage. In this context, gender equality and parameters of reproductive autonomy and gender equality are aspirational, and we would like to posit that we should see this within a reproductive justice framework. Because men and women, irrespective of their marital status, have the same capacity to uptake sterilization, while it's even biologically easier for men to manage. It is the social construction of gender that assigns men more privilege and relegates women to bearing the burden of contraception. Now, why is that the case? Women's reproduction has, as we've argued, historically been a site of control and regulation and biopower. The examples of course, female sterilization and contraception of marginalized women, incarcerated, HIV positive, disabled, has been well documented. Historically, this is a construction of moral panic, of rampant sexuality, of unmarried women or innocent victims, and demonizing of bad sex that needed to be controlled. Similar parallel constructions around homosexuality abound and have a similar checkered history. These work within a very essentialist view of women's sexuality and reproduction. These historical narratives, along with debates around population itself, Malthus, Ehrlich, where population is a problem and its rampant growth needs to be controlled within the context of international trade and economic growth. So coupled, these social histories and scientific discourse have mired and shaped the current health policies and programs that have often in the past treat reproduction as mere mechanics or biological events, rather not recognizing that reproduction is a social construction, lifelong process, which is inextricably linked to women's status and roles of women. In this respect, we agree with our opponents that we value unequal burden on women and we value gender equity. What we are disputing is their view that equality does not mean women will have control. We argue that in our definitions of gender equity, women should have control over their reproductive autonomy. That is really the framework from where we are starting. This is what has been enshrined in many of the international population covenants, the last one, Cairo. That itself has been a debated history. The language around right to decide freely and responsibly, the number and spacing of their children. We know from Tehran to Bucharest to Cairo, there has been a lot of debates of feminists around this. And the problem is that this idea of deciding freely and responsibility has not been specified as a measurable standard, has lent itself to operational ambivalence and confusion, given the background of the population debates and state control that I have just discussed. Absence of this right to decide freely and responsibility is actually a violation where neither men nor women have complete, full choice, informed choice, and full access and control on contraception and decision around their contraceptions. And policies, therefore, have been erroneously designed on these violations of rights. Violations have occurred in the context that I represent, that is very well documented in demography through incentives and disincentives, as was done in India and China. Incentives were, while not inherently coercive, were disproportionately applied to poorer individuals in society, often as conditions for free rations and jobs that led to deleterious effects of forced sterilization programs. And that is why we today are still seeing the effect of such a history in our contraception program today. Okay, so what I'd like to argue is that it is possible, we argue it is possible to design policies and programs to be equitable. While it may be aspirational today, we believe that a strong reproductive justice approach that values contraceptive autonomy can be achieved. There is no perfect country that we can exemplify has done it, but that doesn't mean that we don't start reconstructing positive masculinity and positive approaches to contraception. And most of all, what we need is more evidence on men. We don't even have measures of unmet need on men in our population surveys. We need more understanding and evidence and science around programs for male contraception. Men are missing in our programmatic evidence, and therefore they are missing in our approaches. So what we would like to argue is reconstructing the paradigm of contraception for men and women from the foundations of reproductive justice, which means full constellation of rights, including family law, including the right to live free from discrimination on the basis of gender, equal work, equal wage, and the right to be acting as an independent adult. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And for the last presentation, for the no side, we would have more women sterilized. Joe Strong, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And so I just want to kind of clarify and bring us back to the debate. Of course, we aren't arguing that more women would be sterilized. In fact, that's never been something we've argued. This is about whether there would be the same or more vasectomies among couples in a gender equitable world. And what is a gender equitable world? Now, we've heard from the other side this kind of repeated phrase of reproductive justice, a concept that was coined by Black feminists in the United States, particularly Sister Song and Loretta Ross. And this really was a framework that was designed to talk about the choice when to parent, in what ways one wanted to parent, the choice not to be a parent, and to parent with dignity. And none of that is quantifiable. And I think really this is the crux of the debate. The yes side is saying that equity is something that would be signified by the same or more vasectomies and tubal ligations. That to me is not equity. So I really want to unpack or unpick two demographic assumptions here. The first is that in a gender equitable world, our unit of interest would be the couple. And the second is assumptions around sexual and reproductive health behaviors in a demographic, in a gender equitable world. So why, when gender is a construct, as we've heard from both sides, why, first of all, are we only talking about men and women? And why aren't we talking about the fact that these categories in a gender equitable world would not exist? You would be able to exemplify yourself in whatever means necessary. In many ways, actually, if you think about gender, if you think about equity and justice, we wouldn't have people having to fit into this category of man and woman. Moreover, why would we assume that the couple is still this unit of interest for us? There's still this reproductive unit. There's some really kind of problematic assumptions going on here. And I think more critically, what we've seen when we've seen people talking about gender equitable worlds in this debate is people talking about the world as we understand it with current data. Now, to me, that is not gender equity. As we have seen, and as has been said by both sides, there is no example that we have of gender equity. And what we know about gender, to me, suggests that that's because we don't actually have the tools with which to understand what gender equity would look like. So the answer is, no, we wouldn't necessarily see more within the couples who want to stop childbearing, which is a really important part of this debate question, because would we see the couple as the reproductive unit? Why in that couple would there be one person with testes and one person with ovaries? And what kind of parenting would we see? And again, let's use reproductive justice to talk about the fact that this question itself implies a very specific way of parenting, which is antithetical to this notion of reproductive justice. But let's kind of, for example, for argument's sake, let's just focus on the sexual and reproductive health side. Now, the UNFPA talks about equity really as talking about men and women operating on a level playing field. So we still see the binary of gender existing, which is antithetical to equity. It's antithetical to the notion of pluralities of gender, because there's no equity if we don't even name different genders. But let's have a think. And to me, this is really the crux of what we're talking about. Why would tubal ligations and vasectomies be compared together? And why would they be a proxy for gender equity? Why is that the playing field that we want to level? And yes, absolutely, let's bring in reproductive justice here. Let's bring in this idea of preferences, of desires, of choice and autonomy. Here we can talk about the work of qualitative and mixed methods demographers like Dr. Rashita Nandagiri, Dr. Lee Senderovich, of actually, when we think about gender equity, and the reason why no, we would not expect to see more vasectomies or the same amount of vasectomies as tubal ligations, is also because what we would expect to see is every single person in an equitable world saying that they chose to do what they chose to do because that was their choice, full stop. And that is not something that has been convincingly showed would lead to more vasectomies. In fact, the entire measurement of the idea of equity being associated with prevalence and incidence is one that is fundamentally flawed. Why would we also in a gender equitable world still only see these methods in play? And I think that's really the key thing. Why are we comparing these two things is still kind of beguiling to me because they are two different things. And also, why would we expect that to be an outcome of equity? I think it's a misfocus of what equity is. And I think here we really have to ask ourselves, you know, with this debate, is this really what demography sees as a gender equitable world, is the same or more vasectomies? Now, it seems from the other speakers, they're really keen to see lots of people get vasectomies, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's equity as much as maybe a desire to kind of right wrongs that are currently happening. And I think ultimately, when we think about gender equity, we need to be thinking about freedom of choice and autonomy, not a kind of homogeneity. We would not expect to see the same or more numbers. We can't reduce people to numbers and say that we're being equitable. And that really leads us to kind of ask this question of, as demographers and in demography, do we actually currently have the tools to measure equity? And is the reason we're having this debate because our tools at the moment are just not up to scratch. We can measure by proxy estimates and prevalence, but we can't actually measure equity because we don't know how to envisage a world in which it exists. But it certainly, to me, is not a world in which we would be saying it is based on sterilization rates alone.
Oh, thank you very much. Are you over? Okay. Thank you very much, Joe. Now, I would like to ask one member of the YES team to make a counter argument from what the team No has argued. So Logan, is going to be you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so Logan, please, what do you think are the arguments from the No team that you would highlight as not valid, or if you have any questions for them?
I would highlight specifically one of the arguments about the wife's fertility preference being greater. And I think that that's a very valid argument, but I still don't think that it's an argument for focusing on tubal ligation. We've talked about many definitions of couples here, and we've talked about the dyadic unit and its separation and reformation. But regardless, vasectomy is still a method of female contraception. Vasectomy still prevents a female or a person with a uterus from becoming pregnant, assuming a monogamous relationship or assuming that they're interacting with partners who have had vasectomy. Moreover, in traditional relationships or monogamous relationships, true gender equity would take an unbiased approach such that the male and female partner would evaluate the options in front of them, assuming they are seeking permanent contraception, and they would choose the option that is likely cheaper, it is safer, it is easier, it has better reversal outcomes, and similar efficacy. And I think that it's important for us to state clearly that we are not removing autonomy from a female partner by saying that there would be more vasectomies than tubal ligations. I think that what we're saying, and to be very clear about this, is that we're talking about gender equity bringing men productively into the conversation of reproduction and contraception and allowing them to participate equally in the process. Another argument I'd like to highlight is that gender equity would be signified by an increased number of vasectomies. No, I think it would be a symptom of gender equity. We're talking about gender equity in such a way that if we achieve gender equity, men and women, couples, especially the traditional couples that we have talked about, would be able to choose a method that makes the most sense for their lifestyle and their current needs at the time, seeking permanent contraception. We're not saying that vasectomies would outnumber, we're not saying that vasectomies would be the dominant method and be used by everyone. But what we're saying is we would see more or equal number of vasectomies than tubal ligations simply because of their wide ranging and simple benefits. Again, safety, efficacy, cost, and so on and so forth. I think those are the specific arguments we'd like to highlight.
Thank you very much. If someone else from your team wants to talk, we still would have like 2 minutes or 3 for this argument, or if not, I can go to the no team to have their position. Angela or Priya wants to say something? Okay.
We're comfortable
with
the argument that Logan has put up.
Okay, so thank you very much. So now, Team No, please, who would come to counter-argument the arguments from Team 1? For Team Yes, not Team 1. Joe, Raquel, who would go?
Thank you.
You go first, Akanni, please.
Okay, I will go then. Raquel will come to join. The main focus of the YES team is more about this reproductive health rights, etc. And also as they emphasize about equity. So what we think therefore is to say that if women, particularly in terms of decision about fertility, has the power to decide, so we think the focus therefore should be on women. How do we promote more women being able to regulate whatever fertility intention they have? So for us, we think that women should be able, we should continue to encourage women to do this. But we think for men, there are better options, and we don't see how the same number of men and women are likely to go for permanent solution. Thank you. Raquel, please, you can wait.
Thank you very much for your questions. We agree it's a very difficult and complex subject. But the point is, when we are talking about justice, and this will go for my question for this group, we are concerned about women's, and we are concerned about the amount of power that men gains over women, and how increasing vasectomies would actually may actually increase the power that men has over women. So when we are talking about justice, this is what our biggest concern is about. So this is what I had to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Raquel. So now I would like to ask Angela to put 2 tough questions, as Stan have said, to each team, and then the team prepares to respond. Who is going to respond to Angela? So Angela, please.
Oh, sorry, Deborah, is that?
Oh, Deborah. No,
no, Angela, good.
Angela, is not she? Oh, is Angela Cole, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I have a question for the YES team. Okay. You argue that men are not reproductive beings. How does the potential vasectomy as a symptom of reproductive equity fare in the face of deeply rooted held views on masculinity in the rest of the world outside Australia?
So can Team Yes respond to her question? Priya, can you turn on your...
Yeah, I'm not very clear. Is the question that how does reproductive, how does it affect notions of masculinity simply? Is that the question?
The question is that it's not a question of just having ease and the facility of doing vasectomies compared to tubal ligations. There are other factors like masculinities that the rest of the world believes strongly in. So in the face of those deeply held beliefs, how is your argument that vasectomy is a symptom of reproductive equity function?
I think that what we are suggesting is that reproductive equity has to be defined in a much more broader trope than perhaps all of us are looking at it. And that would incorporate notions of positive masculinity. And we recognize that these are complex forces, that it's just the way it took 300 years for us of very, very troubled social construction of reproduction to be here. It may take that much time, and therefore there are different ways in which we have to think about what we achieve in terms of specific aspects of reproductive autonomy, borrowing from whether it's reformist reform or non-reformist reform. A non-reformist reform would really be asking for large shifts in legal frameworks, in institutions, in the way power, in marriage, in education, and real overall of society and systems, including changing notions of masculinity. Now, that is not achievable in a short period of time. So what we have to do is really think about incremental progress and incremental change in society, where you are going to be destabilizing understanding or deconstructing and reconstructing masculinity and notions of masculinity. So it's not a linear thing. It's not that reproductive autonomy is going to just immediately cause shifts in different ways in which society constructs masculinity. And even within societies, there's a lot of heterogeneity. Clearly, the users, the 30% or the 7% or the 12% that we are seeing in different countries are those that already manifest positive masculinities. What you need is a larger societal shift of more and more people coming into that rubric, and that will take time. I don't think it contradicts. What we are suggesting is change is possible, and we are seeing that.
Oh God, did I lose that?
Thank you. Do you want to add something, Deborah? Just a few words?
Yeah, so I suppose, you know, it's an important question to ask. We do know that, you know, maybe in some South American countries, that sort of machismo, you know, way of practicing masculinity, you know, there are, I mean, as Priya says, this is not linear, but that can have an impact on obviously on uptake of male methods of contraception. But I think I'll come back to what Logan said, which is we're not, you know, we're not saying, look, you know, everyone needs to take up vasectomies. What we're wanting to do is to increase those numbers of options for men and for men to be able to play that role in a way that works for them and works in that society. And if everyone's sort of joining that contraceptive conversation, then sure, vasectomies will increase. But you know, we're not putting vasectomy right out there as the lead. It's just about increasing male methods altogether.
Thank you very much. Angela?
I'd like to answer, Suzana, there's a couple of other questions. Is this the time to do it? Or
we are going to, sorry, Priya, we are going to do that later. Then Angela now is going to ask for the no team one tough question. So, and then we go to the Q&A questions. Thank you. Angela, can you put your question for the no team?
My question for the no team is that, do you believe that vasectomy can be a driver for gender equity, and why?
So, no team, Joe, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. So I think it really depends on how we, again, understand gender equity. And I think underlying this and kind of keeping that, you know, process of, or that framework of reproductive justice in mind, no, gender equity can't be driven by simply raising prevalence of a particular contraceptive. And I think that's really the underlying kind of question here is, when we think of equity and we think of justice, we need to be thinking about these concepts of choice and autonomy, of freedom, of the conditions under which you make those, of a world that basically looks incredibly different to the one that we are in now, regardless of whether you're in North or South, whether you're in high income or non-high income countries. You know, we don't have actually an equitable example, but absolutely not. The driving force behind equity is increasing choice, autonomy, and freedom and the free conditions under which to make reproductive decision-making. And that's also the conditions under which to be able to express oneself free of categorization and free of characterization of gender in a way that doesn't align to how you would like to be, and the freedom to be how one wants to be. Again, something that I think is really difficult to not only measure, but also, in fact, I think really difficult to envisage. But no, I really strongly don't think that just seeing increases in contraceptive practice equals equity. And I think the work of Dr. Lee Senderovich is actually tangible work that proves this point. When we use demographic measures in really simplistic ways and suggest that they are proxies for equity, we actually find when we do qualitative research, and Dr. Lee Senderovich found when she did the qualitative research with, this was with women in Burkina Faso, they said, well, I didn't have a choice and I didn't have autonomy. I was just told to take this contraceptive method. I was obligated to accept, is what she found in her work. And I think it's really dangerous to suggest that we could create equity by simply driving up particular numbers. I think numbers are antithetical to this notion of choice, autonomy, and freedom. So no, I would argue really strongly that what we should be looking for are ways in which to reshape the conditions of the world that we live in for equity. And once that happens, people will be free to do what they like. And who knows what that might look like. But no, I don't think the way that this debate is framed, I would have to come really strongly down on no, I don't think that there would necessarily be more vasectomies and tubal ligations, because I don't necessarily think the world would be framed in such a manner.
Thank you very much. Now I have some questions here from, actually I'm going to first address a question that came when the person registered, and I think it's going to both sides, and it's something that I haven't heard so far in the argument, so I think it's important. So Chandra Checker from the International Institute for Population Science from Mumbai has asked, do incentives and providers bias, as frontline workers are mostly female in countries like India, play a critical role in the prevailing huge inequity between tubal ligation and vasectomy? So I think both teams could say if that can provide, the providers and incentives can increase more vasectomies or more tubal ligation in the world. So please, yes, team, for this answer. Deborah?
Well, Logan, I'll hand to Logan, but I think provider bias is a very important concept and has very negative connotations. And in fact, in Australia, we have great provider bias against providing tubal ligations to young women who have made a very clear autonomous decision. I have to advocate for them many times and I don't get very far. So, you know, I think that's a very important issue, and I think it has huge negative consequences. So Logan, I'll hand to you. I just wanted to say that.
I'll agree with that. And I'll turn it around to also say that provider availability plays a role in this. You know, in the United States, especially, vasectomy is often performed by urologists, which is a specialty. It's rare that OBGYNs or family practice is able to perform vasectomy. And so despite the wide availability and the ease of vasectomy, often men are left to find a specialized provider, and these services are not as readily available as you might hope. And so I think that provider bias not only plays out in that fashion, but also in the fact that what I've mentioned before is this societal assignment of reproduction to women, and such that men are not seen generally as reproductive beings, and therefore they are not responsible for contraception. They don't receive contraceptive counseling in any form unless they actively seek it out. And until we achieve the cultural and systemic changes that will be representative of true gender equity, where men are brought into a reproductive conversation, I don't think that we will see that sort of counseling and those sort of true outcomes take place.
Thank you, just want to add that all of that is true, and what one would need is more sensitive education of providers, you know, in medical curriculums, in psychosocial counseling, in all other spheres, to really shift the way the bias in the program exists right now. So it does, because it is an easy and underemphasized method, it really does need more of a shift. And that, to me, gender equitable embedding and mainstreaming gender equity in health systems means reorientation of the program, including education. So gender equity is a much broader concept that needs to be also embedded in how we practice healthcare.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, and now, Joe, can you answer this question for the no side?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about provider bias and everything, then yeah, I think as has been said, I think any sense of, again, equity or justice would also includes everyone. It goes beyond. And I think what's really interesting in this debate is how it's limited to men and women in a couple who want to stop childbearing. I think that's a really specific framing of this debate. But certainly if we did want to broaden it out, then yeah, I would agree with a lot of what's been said. You know, providers have a huge role in shaping the conditions of care. And we see that across the board. We see that especially in abortion-related care, which is what I work in, the role of providers in shaping those trajectories and to care and the choice of care and shaping what's acceptable. And yeah, you know, gender equity obviously goes way beyond men and women and way beyond the couple. So we would, again, in a gender equitable world in which sexual and reproductive health is equitable, that would include provision. And obviously it would also include, you know, you could argue that there's an awful lot of self-management that we would expect to see in a gender equitable world that we don't see. But yeah, you know, I agree that providers are a huge source of obstacles to equity in some ways, as well as being facilitators, of course, because they are just human and they're living under the same conditions. And I think we can also see, you know, in terms of specifically gender equity, a lot of providers in a lot of contexts are blocking people whose gender in their minds is not acceptable or does not align to, for example, their sex assigned at birth, are blocking them from taking control of their bodies and their autonomous decision making. And you know, there's a huge issue there. And I think that's why, you know, centering those concepts of choice and autonomy and freedom within our societies and contexts and cultures and decision-making power being given to the individual, free of structures of oppression, is a huge thing. So yeah, but I don't know whether Raquel or Akanni, you want to add any more?
Yes, we agree that incentives can improve, acceptance of vasectomy among men. But when you compare incentives, the yield, if you do that for other modern contraceptives, we think it will be more rewarding, you know, when you focus on other modern contraceptives than vasectomy, because vasectomy takes a lot of process decision, you know, for men to want to think, you know, particularly where cultural values are very heavy. It takes a whole lot of decision, you know, a whole lot of processes for men to come to that stage to decide that I want to go for a permanent solution. But we think if there be investment should be more in promoting other modern contraceptives rather than focusing on vasectomy. Thank you.
Thank you. Raquel, you want to add something just fast?
No, they spoke everything I was planning to say. Thank you,
Okay.
Suzana.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I would like to pose I think Joe mentioned it already, but Laura Wong has said about this panel is the couples contraception, but she's asking something that I think in this word is very important, that she says, it looks to me that the assumption behind the original question is that children are born inside a forever and monogamous male and female union. If that's correct, I wonder if we are answering the right question. So, or
exactly,
and I would,
point.
yeah, I would add to that, if that's the case, how that in a world that is not just homogamous couples, male and female couples, then how vasectomy or female sterilization would be divided proportionally.
Yes, exactly. This is exactly the point. I mean, if you're talking about growing divorce rates and growing proportion of women who wish to have 0 children, they need a permanent method, and they can't rely on the vasectomies of their partner because they might change partners. So, and if you look at the contraceptive method mix, the ones with the lowest failure rate, sterilization, tubal sterilization will be there. So we need to be looking at these women too and concerned about addressing their reproductive needs, and not only the monogamous young couple who are interested in postponing fertility or still planning to have children in the future. So this is a group, important group and growing group we should be concerned about.
I'll answer this question also to say that when we're talking about male and female monogamous unions here, I think that you can extrapolate the question, the statement to say that we are by definition talking about unions that can result in pregnancy. We're talking about sperm producers and egg producers in a union. And whether they are monogamous or not, I think makes no difference. Because in a world with true equity and reproductive autonomy, as we've talked about, we would have men who also choose to end their fertility and seek a permanent form of contraception, men who also require reproductive autonomy. And again, I'll reiterate to say that the autonomy of the female partner or the egg-producing partner in these relationships is the most important because they bear the burden of pregnancy, and their autonomy is first and foremost, but men require autonomy on their own. And again, when we're talking about a broader picture that does involve monogamous unions, we're talking about an option that is safer, cheaper, easier, less costly, et cetera. So I think that expanding the question to include non-monogamous unions doesn't change anything on our position.
And maybe I'll add into that to say, well, first of all, to say we were very obedient debaters, so we stuck to the question. But no, I mean, seriously, it's very important actually just to think. I mean, obviously, we did frame some of our, I certainly did, within that heteronormative couple. But I think there's a question actually that perhaps I'll respond to now, which is from Jonathan Stack saying we're seeing a significant increase in young and younger men who are choosing vasectomy. And not only in the north, but certainly that's we're seeing that in Australia, and these are young men who are not in a relationship, and in fact it's interesting because it's when I talk to them, it's around, we've got a little bit of research, but climate change and other reasons for really wanting to undertake a vasectomy. So I think there's a lot of different reasons we can think about, and as Joe says, this is not an easy sort of equation with equity at all.
And Suzana, I just wanted to add one thing here.
Okay.
We are being forced to make an assumption around heteronormativity and monogamous relationships. Nobody has very good, I think since the Kinsey studies, we don't actually have a sense of what is the actual proportion of polyamorous relationships, trans people, gender reassignment, all the complexities. So sticking to what we know is where we really, use the frame of this debate. But I want to emphasize what we are suggesting is that men in polyamorous relationships, men in binary relationships should have the same ideas and access and choice and freedoms to exercise and demand the vasectomy, which right now the programs themselves are biased against men. So I think in a gender equitable world, recognizing all these categories, we would still imagine that there would be more parity and we would not see this kind of skew that we see today.
Yeah, I'll give the word to Joe, but I would just highlight that the panel who organized is a couple contraception, and this is the main goal of the panel. But the question didn't say that was within a couple, was about men and women. So just take that into account, because we didn't impose that would be only couples. So Joe, please go ahead.
Just to say, Suzana, it does say among couples who wanting to stop childbearing at the end. So I think that's where the confusion is coming from. But
okay.
Yes, so I think, but I hear your point.
Okay.
I think what's interesting, I just wanted to kind of add on and build maybe or respond slightly to what Logan was saying, which is when he mentions sort of safe, safer, cheaper. Those concepts I think don't exist in a gender equitable world, because that means that you're having to make a decision based on something other than choice. Those are the conditions that we were talking about. And I think saying, you know, someone's autonomy being more of a priority than another person's autonomy, again, I think, whilst I understand that as a mechanism now, under the conditions that we have now as being really important, I just am not convinced that in a gender equitable world, that's the kind of, that would be equity, that would be justice. If we had a hierarchy of autonomy, of autonomous needs, and I think if we had options that were better because they were safer, or because they were less invasive, or because they were cheaper, that to me doesn't mean equity. That means that we have a lack of choice, because people are then having to choose based on socioeconomic factors, based on the potential ramifications to their body. And I agree with Priya. I think Priya makes a really great point, which is like, we just have so little data on so many people in the world still. But I think, you know, something we have the least amount of data on is what gender equity would look like. And I think that's why I find, again, that I think it's just not something that I think can be convincingly argued that vasectomies would increase or do anything in a gender equitable world. For all we know, actually, all of these trends might be exactly the same, and we might be really shocked. We literally just don't know what it would look like. But what we would know, as long as people had free and autonomous choice, we would know that that's gender equity. And I think that's why I don't feel like expected outcomes are you know, it's something that we can have if we're talking about equity and justice. We've just got, the only expected outcome is 100% of the people are saying, this was what I wanted to do.
Okay, thank you very much. We have so a few minutes left, and we have the reconciliation. There are a lot of questions, comments, so I would ask the team debaters if they can answer some of those later by reading, and we can ask IUSSP to put, if they think it's important to put that, we can put in the website some of those questions or suggestions that have been raised. So now I would like to ask Ambrose Akinlo to do a reconciliation of the debate, and then we are going to have a closing by Stan later. So please, Ambrose, and also just let me tell you, the poll, the post-debate poll is open now. So if you have changed your mind, you can answer now. But if you did not change, you have the same idea now. So please answer the poll so we have the results later before we close the debate. So please, Ambrose, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let me thank the debaters for a job well done. This is a very difficult topic, and it is also very complex. And I will have to admit that you address a lot of these complexities. And the audience too have been very active. I have been taking time to look at the charts as well as the Q&A, and I realized they have also been raising a lot of issues, some of which you address, both methodological and on the conceptualization of gender equity. But let me first highlight some of the issues that both teams raised. The yes team, generally, the argument centered around the fact that yes, if we have a gender equitable world, we will expect that more men will take up vasectomies. They are not necessarily arguing here that gender equity promotes vasectomy, but they are like, men's increased uptake of vasectomy is a step towards men taking more responsibilities in reproduction. So for them, more men taking up vasectomies is a pointer to the fact that men are taking more responsibilities. They are sharing the reproductive responsibility. And this is where the issue of reproductive justice actually coming. Whereas the no team, their argument centers on the fact that having a gender equitable world does not necessarily guarantee that more people will take up vasectomies. And in actual fact, a lot of their arguments center on the fact that, on the point that the focus should be on giving women more choice and also increasing their empowerment so that they can make more informed choices. So from the argument of the no team, they were more like, let's focus on who carries more burden when it comes to pregnancy and give them more power to be able to make the right decision when it comes to choices. Some of the points brought up to buttress arguments in both areas. We have the argument that in Australia, about 25% of men 40 years and above were taking up vasectomies, which is quite high compared to most other parts of the world. So I also actually quickly look at those in the US, and I think the numbers are a little close to, like we have up to 500,000 men per annum taking up vasectomies in the US, whereas we have up to 700,000 women per year taking up tubal ligations. So, but generally speaking, and the debaters pointed this out, sterilization is not a popular method overall. So that seems to be an argument that both sides of the debate seem to pick in their analysis of this. Now, from the audience, there was also this issue that some people raised. I remember, I saw one question talking about the reversal rate, the sources of reversals, because this also goes into the decision of whether to adopt a method or not. And I think the debaters did not actually emphasize any of this, even though the first debater for the yes side mentioned that tubal ligations are more easily reversible than, vasectomies are more easily reversible, yeah. But we did not have data like on the success rates and the rest. Although I quickly Googled this up and I realized that it depends on a number of factors, including the age, including how long you have had the method and all those things. So the success rate varies, but it could be as high as 80 or 95%, depending on a combination of factors, including the age of the woman, the age of the man, for how long the method has been in place. Now, my summary of what the arguments that we have had today, as I will not want to take a lot of your time, is that equity will not necessarily translate to more vasectomies, and that more vasectomies should not be used as an indicator to measure equity. And also, we also have one of these debate points that, yes, let us promote more male involvement. Let us make the health system more male-friendly so that they can be more involved in reproductive health overall. The audience also got in this debate a lot from the Q&A. Some of these issues they raise is about this question, assuming that vasectomy or that, reproduction takes place only within marriage. So they pointed this out, but I think Suzana addressed that already. We are a panel on couples reproductive health, and that is the framework within which we are asking this question. So, but we take note of a lot of the issues raised, methodological, as well as measurement problems associated with equity. So, but overall, I think I'm leaving this debate more enlightened than I came into it. And I have noted a lot of issues that I can use further in my work, working on a couple's reproductive health. So I would like to thank the debaters for a job well done. And I'm sure the videos, once it's posted on the website, most of us will still go back there to look at some of the points you raised as a reference for our works. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambrose. I think Paul is going to share with us the result for the poll now. So there you have 56% says yes, and no is 44%. I think it's, there are a lot of balance and shows the complexity of the questions, the question posed. And I would just pass the word to Stan now, but reminding that, oh, that's the second, that was the first, sorry, oh, I missed here. The first result was the yes, and now we have yes, the same is 31%. No one has changed from yes to no. The no, the same as before, the 44%, and no changed to yes, 25%. So I think Team Yes has done a very good job. But I think the question, the story Stan told us in the beginning, is a very, I think tells the story where we are now with vasectomies and tubal ligation. Why is vasectomy still being whispered on people's ears and not being said freely, as women would say that they have tubal ligation or using the pill or others. And I'm from Latin America, and I can say that's still a very, very, very difficult decision for men. And as the debaters were saying, we need a lot of more advocacy around men and including men, and now also bringing the couples to reproduction, as the panel is arguing always, because we don't have men on board. So Stan, can you go and take the lead now? Thank you very much for everyone being here and the panelists, and was great to hear from all of you.
So also give thanks to all the panelists and people who gave questions and others. Looking at the poll results, it looks like the no team was a little bit more convincing, or quite a bit more convincing, which is interesting how our thinking evolves during these things. And yes, the panel is couples and reproductive health, and I would claim, though I don't have the statistics, that probably 95+% of births in the world do happen within couples, whether monogamous or polygamous. We do have the other options to think about, non-binary and those sorts of things, but certainly most of reproduction is within couples around the world. Also, I just want to say, please stay tuned. This panel is continuing this year. We may have another session, a debate or not, or a scientific session, but we found that these debates are very stimulating, and that's why we keep them. And if you have other colleagues who are interested, I believe there is a recording. Will be posted within a day or two of what we did today. And thanks to the panelists for following up on the Q&A that we weren't able to answer during the time allotted. So thanks again, and I'll turn it over to Shireen to say goodbye from the IUSSP.
Yeah, and let me just add a word of thanks to all of you from the IUSSP for attending the debate, for participating in the discussion so positively, and for voting in your decision. I couldn't quite interpret the change, but it's very interesting. All the speakers had such unique perspectives, and really a lot of food for thought. And I'd like to thank the speakers for the very, very insightful presentations. The panel, Stan, Suzana, and all of you made this so successful. Paul from IUSSP for organizing it from our side. Thank you very much. And please do attend more of these very exciting webinars that this panel in particular has organized. So bye, good morning, good evening, good night to everyone, and see you at the next panel. Bye.